race fans, my name is Taylor and welcome to Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk about all the updates, theories, news recaps, and more of the NASCAR Cup Series. Arguably the most anticipated event of the NASCAR season was held Monday, the Food City Dirt Race at Bristol Motor Speedway, after rain literally flooded the camping area and in turn made the track super muddy, super unraceable. There was no way they were going to get the track done in time or even remotely close to ready on Sunday, but Monday was beautiful. The clouds cleared, it was nice and sunny, and the trucks and cup cars took to the track to race in the dirt. With high anticipation comes high amount of opinions, which I will get into during this erased recap episode. Today I'm going to briefly break down the truck race, line up the finish and the start, go over what I learned from that, and then dive right into the Food City Dirt Race, discussing how those drivers did, and then I'll go down the line discussing my top 5 to 10 moments of the race before I take what I saw onto a scale and rate it above or below the yellow line. So let's get into this. Let's start with the truck race. Here's how the drivers started. The ones highlighted in yellow are the Cup guys and other drivers pulling double duty for Monday. I mentioned how they started last podcast, so we don't need to go over this for too long. I'll bring up how they finished now. To my surprise, the Cup guy who hadn't been in a truck for 15 years prior to this, making his third series start ever. I think the guy with practically no dirt experience at all took home the trophy. Martin Truex Jr. was your winner. The 36th different driver to win in all three series. Very impressive. Pretty much dominated the day. There was no one else really truly in contention with him. The only guy remotely close was Ben Rhodes, who contended for the lead a little bit today. He did well keeping up with the pace. No clue how Martin Truex Jr. did that or how he learned so fast, but power to him. He had a great car and he looked like he'd been racing in the dirt for a long time, even though we know he has not. Something I kept in the back of my mind for the Cup race today. Rounding out the top 5, Raphael Lester seemingly out of nowhere finished third. His car came to life when it mattered. He really wasn't in the top 10 that I saw for the majority of the race. So like I said, when it mattered, he came to life and got in third. Todd Gilliland, with a much needed good race day, came in fourth. And Cup driver Chase Briscoe, with dirt experience, finished fifth. The other Cup drivers here, Bubba Wallace finished 11th. Stuart Friesen finished 12th. He was going to be making his Cup debut in the Food City Dirt Race, finishing 12th, as I said. Kevin Harvick in 15th, Suarez in 17th, and Dirt royalty Kyle Larson was taken out in a significant crash, not finishing this race, placing 35th. Out of 40 cars on the track, 9 were taken out of this race, but almost every car had some damage there. There was 12 cautions for 54 laps, not including the ones for stage breaks, according to Bob Pockrass, and 96 green flag laps. The longest of those green flag runs was only 13 laps at the beginning of the race. It was a very stop and go race that I don't like stop and go races. I dread them. I feel like it takes away the pace. It takes away the excitement. And though it was stop and go, I was able to gather a bit of information from the truck race that I could apply to the Cup race, starting with track position. That's key. It is the key to winning a dirt race. As being a first-time dirt race viewer, even Kyle Larson, who started in the back of the truck field, was only able to work his way up to like the 15-ish or in the right outside the top 10. I'll talk about track position more when we get to our moments of the Cup race. I also noticed that there was not a huge tire crisis like we saw in practice for the truck guys. Different story for the Cup car guys, but I'm not sure what changed there because the truck procedures stayed exactly the same. So I think they just learned how to work on the track better and how to save their tires. Also, watching the truck race, I hoped this wasn't the case, but I became painfully aware that we were not going to have anyone racing in the top line of this race. The top line of the track was just not safe. The only quote-unquote safe area of the track was only the bottom. So we were going to see a lot of single file racing or people trying to get around and wreck. Look at this picture of the track before and after the race. Here's before. And then look at this after shot. The track just dried up so much. I feel like a lot of the issues for the truck and Cup race was track maintenance. I don't feel like NASCAR really kept up with the track well, and it caused a lot of unnecessary spins and wrecks. Very slick, very dry, very dangerous. A few more things I want to quickly mention before we jump into the Cup race. There were a lot of spins and wrecks, like I just mentioned, which cut actual racing time short. Made the race a little, like I said before, stop and go, a little iffy for me. A lot of those wrecks were caused, like I said, by track conditions, but also these cars. Quite a few seemed to fall off the pace, or seemed the lack of time they could adjust their cars really hurt them, because at least for the truck series, they didn't have like a lot of in-between competition cautions, so you're stuck with the changes you make during the stage breaks and only during the stage breaks. That's the only time you can touch your cars. So if you made the wrong changes, you were screwed for the rest of the race, and we saw a lot of drivers fall off the pace that were at the start of the field. Finally, a quick and very important tidbit that I learned is that dirt experience might not be the key to winning. Important to keep that in mind here as we go into the Food City Dirt Race right now. Let's start by talking about how this race was perceived, and let me tell you guys, I am impressed. Here is the viewership numbers of this race. It brought in 3.114 million viewers and earned a rating of 1.8 according to Adam Stern, and around 45,000 people streamed this race on a Fox's digital service app. Oh, y'all, keep in mind, this is a Monday race. These are phenomenal numbers for a Monday race. I think they're even better than the Daytona 500 viewership, which I know was into an overtime, but still fantastic. The hype really worked on getting the views, and even the Today Show talked about this race. Awesome to see. I know a lot of people also really like this race, and so far in Jeff Gluck's poll, we have 79% of people saying that this was a good race. I'll give my final number on the next podcast I do, but so far I have to share the numbers that are coming up because we have an off week coming up in NASCAR. But so far the numbers are looking really good, so an overwhelming amount of people liking this race. So let's dive into the actual happenings of the race itself. Here are how the drivers lined up, starting with Kyle Larson. He was sent to the rear for an engine change, so Denny Hamlin and Ryan Blaney will now make up row one. A new addition to the rear list is Matt DiBenedetto. I hate this for this team. It's the last thing this team needed after seemingly finding their groove these past few weeks. They were sent to the rear of the field because they got damage on the car after it came off of the lift gate. Hate it for those guys. And then Michael McDowell was also sent to the back of the field for unapproved adjustments. That's how your field lined up. Here's how they finished the race. You'll see here that Joey Logano topped the charts and took the checkered flag, winning the Food City Dirt Race, followed by Ricky Stenhouse Jr., a dirt racer with an impressive and much-needed end to his day. Then you have Denny Hamlin. We'll talk about how he finished in the down-the-line segment and why he finished where he did. And then Daniel Suarez coming in fourth in this race. He continues to impress the crap out of me week after week. This team is inching closer to a win week by week, and they may be the first new team to win a race. Everything just seems to be firing on all cylinders on that team, and Suarez is producing really impressive results. I love Daniel Suarez. I'm a big fan of his, and I love seeing him succeed in that 99 car. An awesome weekend, and a few weekends, I guess, for that team. Finally, rounding out the top five, we got to talk about Ryan Newman, another dirt racer, in fifth, William Byron in sixth, the Bristol Dirt Race iRacing winner. In seventh, we have Tyler Reddick, another dirt guy. Eighth is Ryan Blaney, the fastest in practice 2, finishing with a car that was a horrific wreck. Take a look at this picture I'm going to put on the screen here. This is how he finished the race, and he finished it in 8th out of all the other drivers seemingly having other issues. He wheeled it. He wheeled it to the end. Very impressive from Ryan Blaney. In 9th place was Eric Jones in that really cool tied car, and in 10th was Chase Elliott. He stayed pretty consistent throughout the day. He stayed pretty much right where he finished. Really good for Chase Elliott, who has some dirt experience. So by now you've probably looked through the whole list, and you're thinking, what in the world? How did Larson finish where he did? How did Christopher Bell finish where he did? We'll talk about that in the down the line segment. A lot to discuss there. Larson, who we all had in our fantasy lineups as winning this race probably, finished 29th. And another prominent dirt racing figure, Christopher Bell, didn't even finish this race, crashed out. We will talk about how this all happened in down the line. Before we get to that, though, gotta mention my race pick for this weekend, Alex Bowman finishing in 22nd after losing 4th gear in his car. I have no clue how that happens, and I know I have the running gag. I totally cursed my race picks. I'm still gonna go with that. I feel like I do. I feel like he would have finished in the top 3 or 5 today if he didn't have that issue with his car, because I feel like his car was strong enough. Even, in the practices, you saw he topped the charts in practice 1, I believe. I was very upset with that. I wanted him to do really well. I thought this was his time to shine. It's time to get that win and kind of shake off the slump of a season he's had so far. So I was a little disappointed to see that happen to Alex Bowman today, who could have had a really nice finish. Martin Truex Jr., who won the truck race, ended up in 19th after getting really too high into the wall on the restart. At the end of the race, I have no clue what happened to his car. I watched the clip back, and he just fell out of line and fell back in the field. We'll talk about that overtime as well in the down the line segment. Drivers I expected to do well but did not were Chase Briscoe, Austin Dillon finishing 20th and 21st, and Bubba Wallace, who was running in the top 5 or top 10 all day long, finished 27th after a very confusing and controversial call, I believe, by NASCAR by not pulling a caution when Bubba Wallace's tire went down and he spun around on the track, and then laps later they pulled a caution for a seemingly same instance for Marlar, who also went around on the track. I don't agree with the call. I'm not going to go further into it. That's all I'm going to say. Don't agree with the call. So let's move on to stage finishers just to finish out this whole lineup here. Stage finishers, Martin Truex Jr. took stage 1, and then Logano took stage 2. Gotta shout out Bubba Wallace here. we just talked about him, but shout him out for finishing 7th in both stages 1 and 2. Daniel Suarez getting so close to a stage win, finishing 2nd in stage 2 and 4th in stage 1. That team really racked up the points today. We also saw Ricky Stenhouse Jr. rack up some stage points along with Chris Buescher, Ryan Newman getting points in both stages. Finally, in stage 2, it invited Tyler Reddick and Eric Jones to some stage points. Like I keep saying, this was a very good day for a lot of guys that really needed it. These points, of course, count towards the playoff contention. So let's talk about point standings right now. Denny Hamlin, still winless this season, sits at the top of the charts, and Logano moves up to 2nd in points, with Larson moving down 2 spots to 4th in points. Martin Truex Jr. moves up a spot, and I won't worry about the in-between guys right now. Let's go to the cutoff line. At this point, I want to talk about the drivers specifically that are 2 above the cutoff line and 2 below the cutoff line, because those are the drivers that really, when it comes down to points, it's going to matter if you can really get into the round of 16 or not. The playoffs, like I just mentioned there, have 16 drivers in. If you're not in that round of 16, you are out of contention for the championship title. So it's very vital that these teams get enough points to make it into that chase. So let's talk about the drivers that are in. The 2 drivers that are in right now on points that are around the cutoff line, we have Stenhouse and Bowman, and the 2 below the line this week are Buescher and Preece. If we're going to compare it to last week, the 2 guys above the line were Buescher and Kurt Busch, and 2 below the line were Stenhouse and Preece. So we have some shifts there. Of course, there's still time. This is very early in the season still, but just keeping an eye on that little bubble right there of drivers who could make it in or make it out is a very, very critical spot to be in for these drivers when it comes to points. So let's conclude that section. We talked about points. We talked about how the drivers did. We talked about where the drivers stand. And then let's go down the line to discuss some key moments of this race. It was so incredibly hard for me to only choose a few moments, but I condensed my thoughts into broader topics with 5 key moments I want to discuss with all of you. Down the line, moment number 1, called early complications. On lap 11, I believe Kyle Busch quickly came to the pit road because the temperatures in his car were off the charts, mostly due to dirt and mud caked on the front grille of his car, making those temperatures really spike. The moment is critical for me because this kind of started what I'm calling the downfall of the dirt guys prevailing during this race. Kyle Busch, as we know, is a dirt racer. He's raced in the dirt before, at least just a little bit. He's really good at it too, and to have someone who might have been in people's fantasy lineups, at least I know mine, or someone's garage pick, pretty much be out of it so early was really a shame, and I thought this was a week that Kyle Busch really could have either won or really stepped up and got some points after he's had an off and on season so far. I thought this would have been good for him. I also thought maybe, potentially, he could work his way back to the front of the field, but that leads me to moment number 2, no fancy title here, it's called track position matters. I learned in this race very quickly that you want to start towards the front of the field because your chances of getting caught in someone else's mess is very little. You don't have to be packed in like little sardines, either minimizing your chances again at crashing out. It is so hard to pass at this track in general, and then you add in dirt and it makes it nearly impossible. The track was so slick and you only had one line to work on, at least for the beginning of the race, and I thought it would change, but it really did not. So either you had to move someone out of the way or hope for a caution to stack everyone else up again to gain track position. Kyle Busch, with an early complication, gave him an uphill climb during this race, and passing on dirt in these cars, like I said at Bristol, it was impossible. So there wasn't a really big chance that Kyle could come back from this, and I wish he could have. I really do, but there was just no way he could have with the implications that track position gave him. Speaking of track position, let's move on to restarts, where track position really does matter. We're going to talk about the end shootout between Joey Logano, Denny Hamlin. I thought this was going to be a really insane restart with Denny Hamlin, in his ear, his crew chief was telling him, find a way to win this race, find a way, even if it means wrecking out Joey Logano for the win, find a way. I thought this was going to be an insane into the race. It was not. Take a look at what happened here. Joey Logano shot out as Denny Hamlin fell behind, trying to pass on the high side, which we all knew was too slick to do anything. Wasn't sure why he did that until after the race. He commented on why. Then Martin Truex Jr. got up there for some odd reason and fell way back. Hamlin afterwards said he would want to redo if he was given the chance, but he said in a post-race interview that he wanted to pass Logano clean for the win, which I commend. Also knowing that Joey Logano would have kept that in his memory bank down the line, but also with Joey Logano, we know that Joey Logano would do whatever it takes to win. In the most recent race, I'm thinking in my head, the Daytona 500, where he literally wrecked out his teammate trying to get the win. So if I was Denny Hamlin, and of course I'm not in Denny Hamlin's head, knowing that I was the top guy in points, I could see his reasoning for not trying to wreck out Joey Logano, which could have actually caused a cascading effect of wrecking out the whole field. But at the same time, this is winner number 7 in 7 different races. The playoff contention might come down to drivers getting in on wins and not points if we're to get more winners. So I don't know, this choice might come back to haunt Denny Hamlin. We'll have to find out in the races to come. Moment number 4 called "I'm Gonna Wreck It." Yes, I'm stealing a quote from Wreck-It Ralph. I'm so sorry, but that's the only thing I can use to compare to this section. As we expected, we got a lot of wrecks, a lot of spins, but the wrecks that occurred seemed to happen to the wrong people. Gotta start with the wreck that resulted in a red flag at the first stages of the race, a pileup with Eric Almirola. Take a look at this. He goes around on the dirtle. They're like the little turtles, kind of like they have in the dirt race, but we're calling them turtles because it's on the dirt. Goes to the middle of the track and basically is used as a ball and a pinball machine around all the other cars. A really scary wreck that resulted in Almirola's 4th finish of 30th or worse, with a DNF as well. He has not finished better than 10th this season at all and only has 2 top 20s, minus the dual race, which I'm not counting. This is not the season for Almirola, especially not the one he needs after, he's going into a contract year. Though he has a crap ton of sponsorship, this still is not good. This is not good for SHR. I really hope they can get it together over there, and I really feel for Eric Almirola. I really do. This wreck also involved Golubic, LaJoy, and also Alfredo, and a few others. Truex, I'm going to play this again, Truex barely made it through. Like, holy cow, I thought his race was over at that point. Obviously, he didn't win the race. I thought he was in contention at that time, so I was so glad that he was able to make it through. It got too close for comfort there. There was more downfall for the SHR camp when Harvick and Briscoe got into each other with 1 to go. I think it was at the end of stage 1. I think I'm getting my timeline mixed up here. I also am trying to think if it was before the competition caution, if it was by the competition caution. It was somewhere in stage 1. I do know that for sure. And then behind them, the 5100 and 15 go around as well. It was a mess. It was a total mess. And then on lap 52, the 2 best dirt guys in the track collected each other. We're talking Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell. I did expect them to not finish well just because everything you think you know this season doesn't work out so well in the end. So I expected the worst. I feel bad that I did, but I really did. But I just didn't expect them to collect each other and take each other out. It was a total tragedy. No one's fault here. Bell tried to make something work on the Highline and it just didn't. If anyone had a chance of making the top of Bristol's dirt track work, it was going to be Larson or Christopher Bell, but it just did not work. Of course, Larson was pretty upset after that, rightfully so. Everyone expected him to win this race. It was his to lose, pretty much. And he and Christopher Bell were moving forward, probably would have taken over the race if it weren't for that crash. Heck, Larson started in the back of the field, and by the end of stage 1, he moved up to, I think, 6th place, or even just inside the top 10. It was insane. This wreck also collected Chastain, and a few others got damaged too. Like I said, it was a total tragedy. Then we move into stage 2 when the track just went bad super fast. It was already not great, and then it went worse. All these cautions seemingly resulted from the way the track was, leading to a pretty significant crash on lap 152. There is a lot of footage to show here because this is just scary to me, seeing this sitting at home on my couch. This caution seemed to happen after Bubba and Chase made some contact and was just a domino effect going to the back of the field way far on this restart, and visibility played a factor in this. Austin Dillon, you can see from this picture, his view wasn't any better at all. I don't even think he knew he was crashing at all. This wreck involved, like I mentioned, Ryan Blaney, Austin Dillon. We have Kyle Busch involved, not needing another incident happening today. Michael McDowell, Larson, who also didn't need more trouble. My race pick, Alex Bowman, was involved in this. Yaley, Ware, and Preece. It was horrible, and from this point on, NASCAR then decided to move to a single-file restart format, which leads me to moment number 5. This is a moment, if you really like the dirt race, you're not going to like what I'm going to say here. Well, what I have to say is the honest truth, at least from my perspective, looking at this race in an overhead view. I had a day to digest, I had a day to make sure this is what I wanted to say. And here are my opinions. Moment number 5 is called Run Before You Fly. As entertaining as this race was, and believe me, I enjoyed moments of this race, I really did. It was flawed, and it wasn't really thought through thoroughly. It was hyped up way too much, and the procedures and rules should have been good enough to start with, not to change in the middle of the race. One of my buddies, Zach Bell from Dipstick Debates, made a really good point telling me that this should have been an all-star race or a non-points race, and to that I really do agree. I hadn't thought of that before, but I really do agree with that statement. This race was just expensive to the teams with too many unknowns and a lot of some mistakes, I believe, on NASCAR's part for this, starting with cars and tires. These cars weren't made for the dirt. We all knew that to start with, but I think there was more testing. These cars could have been much better. We saw guys deal with temperature issues this race that ruined some of their cars. And the tires, though they were made for this track and made for the dirt, didn't stand the test of time. Look at these tires. They are smooth all the way around. We knew we were going to get tire wear, but if you remember, we had to change the procedures after the first practice because we realized that these cars were not going to last the 75 laps, I believe, that all of stage 1 and stage 2 were. And we had to add in more competition cautions. So even before the race, we were changing some rules. And then, like I mentioned, we changed rules in the middle of the race. In the middle of the race, after the last wreck I mentioned with Ryan Blaney, NASCAR changed procedures and made restarts single file. I don't want to get into this too much because it's a tough call. It was a good call to make the track safer for these cars, make visibility a lot better for these cars because of the dirt. But also that could have been prevented. I don't like this change in the middle of the race. I feel like it shouldn't have been this way. It should have been figured out before the race even began, and invalidates to me the legitimacy of this race and the winner. I feel like it did actually help Joey Logano win this race, in my honest opinion. And that goes to track conditions as one of the other issues I had with this race in general. As hard as the team worked to prep the track, and I do not want to discount the hard work that the ladies and gentlemen put into making this track good enough in making it possible, there was a lot to improve still. Driving conditions were very dangerous at times, talking about all these wrecks, and resulted in needless accidents. This track needed to be tested a lot more before these cars practiced on it. Even like before practice, this track needed to be tested with the actual cars that they were going to be running. I know with COVID, it limits a few things, but there was so many changes this weekend, it invalidated a lot of the process for this race. The track conditions were made for an entertaining race, of course, with it being all slick and cars going around, but it made the race reckless, and to me, reckless racing is not good racing. With that comment, that was the end of my top 5 moments of this race. Before we get into my rating of the actual event itself, we have to talk about the fact that mid-race they announced that we're actually going to come back to the Bristol Dirt Race next season and, quote, beyond. And based on my opinions I gave here in my top moments, I am actually very iffy about this. I don't want to be, but I am. I'm not totally against it. I'm not totally for it. They have a lot that they should have learned from the Food City Dirt Race that they can take to next season. And honestly, the biggest thing for me is they got to be more prepared. It can't be here's a cool idea, let's do it. It's got to be, here's a cool idea, let's prepare for it, let's test cars on the track, let's test the dirt more, let's test long runs on this dirt more. There's got to be more preparation for this, and I think if they do that, we can have a better race next season. Of course, this was a way to gain interest of the public eye. It definitely turned a lot of heads, but we gotta button this up. NASCAR, I really think that they can, if they listen to the guys that have run on the dirt before, if they really take into consideration what they saw here, I think that they can. It's just gotta be better next time. So we're coming back to the Bristol Dirt Race whether we like it or not, but I'm hoping we come back having learned something. Yet again, I am just reminded that we're coming back on different cars. Now that I'm reminded of the next-gen cars, they have to test the next-gen cars, especially on the dirt. Because if they're not able to run on the dirt and we go to the Bristol Dirt Week and they haven't tested, they haven't put in the work, it's going to be more of a mess, I think, because these drivers are going to be just learning how to run those new cars. So all these hopes, all these issues with this race, I know they're very opposite to my peers, opposite to a lot of the NASCAR community. Don't get me wrong, I found this race entertaining, like I said, but I found it sloppy and not very well put together as it could have been. And that could be blamed on a lot of factors outside of NASCAR's control and a lot also in their control. The wrecks made for a choppy race and passing was near impossible, but the race did seem to be very exciting in some moments. It was exciting to me and nail-biting to see these cars slip and slide into the turns right next to the driver next to them, not knowing if they were going to collide or not. There was bumping and banging as we see at Bristol in the short track races, but it was different. Lots of cars with damage and a lot of money for these teams. I hate this. I really do. I'm struggling with this rating so much. It was not nearly as bad as Atlanta. You know, I didn't really care for Atlanta. Didn't like the Daytona 500, which I gave an exceptional rating of 65% when it really should have been 35%. I just was too scared to put my real rating out there, but now I'm not. After those two races, the next highest race rating was the Daytona Road Course with 60%. I gotta say this race was pretty on par with that one for me, but it was slightly better in the slightest way possible, so I'm gonna give this race a 62% above the yellow line. I blame the low rating on the lack of preparation, as I have nailed home in this podcast, but there was only so much anyone could do with the COVID restrictions and stuff. They just have to take what they learned and go from there. And from there, we will move into an off week. So I'm going to be taking the rest of this week to detox a bit from NASCAR and then jump right back in, maybe with some updates on the podcast, but absolutely start with a pre-race of the Blue Emu Maximum Pain Relief 500. Lots of words there, but we're going to Martinsville, you guys, on April 10th. Lots of fun history there, lots of tempers on a short track, good time, so I am hoping they bring the heat to that race. But until then, enjoy this off week, And thank you all so much for listening to Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk about all the updates, theories, news, recaps, and more of the NASCAR Cup Series. Check out the description below for awesome links to awesome places. Check out my socials for more racing content and lap-by-lap coverage of the Cup Series races on race weekend. Check out the Podium Finish and their content. I'll be writing a race recap for them on Martinsville when we return from the off weekend, so stay tuned for that. Finally, check out an episode I did over at the Racing Refresh channel with Zach and Justin from Dipstick Debates. We talked about the Bristol dirt race as well, lots of opinions, lots of exciting conversations, lots of fun. Go check them out and hear more about how they felt about the race for more race takeaways. It was an absolute blast. Make sure you check all those channels out and subscribe to my channel for more racing content. Thank you all so much for your support, and until next time, I'll see ya.